On the way into town, it was loud and there was a man talking to himself on the train, going on about the greatest rapper of all time. I made my way through Powell Station where I was spit out onto Market Street. One of the first things I noticed was how many homeless people were hanging out around this major thoroughfare. The reality of seeing this firsthand was difficult to digest as a mix of more polished citizens shuffled through. Because of COVID-19, most people were wearing masks in public, which was assuring to see. Even though the year 2020 isn't the best time to travel, it was good to know most people were being cautious. I found this place called Mel's Diner and got a bite to eat. Later, I walked to Union Square. Built in 1904, the St. Francis Hotel imprinted itself on this public space. The sunlight and cool air was relaxing as I sat down on some steps overlooking the plaza. The next day, I met up with my cousin, Hannah, to go hiking. We drove across the Golden Gate Bridge, which I assure you was still very iconic despite the fog. We made it to the Tennessee Valley Trail, a short but hilly hike to the Pacific Ocean. This unique landscape of green plants and white haze creates an otherworldly scene. The vibrant vegetation lit up the valley. There was a beautiful pond leading up to the rocky sands. Cliffs gave way to a nice area where people were sitting and walking along the shore. I've done a bit of traveling, but at age 26, this was my first time seeing the Pacific Ocean. On the way back to San Francisco, we drove to an overlook called Hawk Hill. Once again, a cloudy wall greeted us. We joked around about how great the views were. This is the site of Battery Construction Number 129, a project that was intended to protect the entrance to the San Francisco Bay during World War II. However, it was never completed. That evening, I walked in the direction of the San Francisco Ferry Building, far off in the distance through the skyscrapers. Eventually, I made it to the historic building, which managed to survive the devastating 1906 earthquake. I was eating dinner at Gott's roadside restaurant outside, minding my own business, when a seagull boldly approached me. In an instant, the thief stole my cheeseburger right off the plate. It was hilarious. The next day, I set out along Mason Street from my hotel. This right here is the kind of stuff you think of when you hear about San Francisco. I climbed and climbed and climbed, waving flags at the Fairmont Hotel congratulating me for accomplishing such a feat. I later learned this was the Nob Hill neighborhood. I began a great descent to a coffee shop called the Gallery Cafe. It was a relaxing spot on a quiet street where I enjoyed some coffee outside. Continuing the walk, I started to notice signs written in Chinese lettering called Hanzu. I figured this must be the famous Chinatown district. Now, I never saw the famous Dragon's Gate Arch, but I did see this tunnel that had a neat design. This is what happens when you don't have an itinerary and insist on randomly exploring on foot. Plus, this city is just so massive that I know I probably just scratched the surface. You could see workers setting up outdoor restaurant seating, a common theme with COVID-19, still a present danger. I ended up at this beautiful park called Washington Square. This guy stopped me and asked why I was filming. When I told him, he was very nice and encouraged me in my efforts of documenting SF. Social distancing circles were outlined on the lawn of the park. St. Peter and Paul Church was a peaceful sight. Judging by the storefronts, I got the sense that I was now in a historically Italian neighborhood. So, I decided to get a cold treat at Gelato Delicatessen. Afterwards, I walked towards the focal point of Columbus Avenue. I want to just call it the Pointy Building, but the official name is the Transamerica Pyramid. Such an iconic structure. Wow. In addition to all the people wearing masks, another common theme was boarded up buildings. It piqued my curiosity for how this metropolis might look and feel during a normal year. This was certainly not a normal year. I continued to meander through the central business district. It was there that I stumbled across a hidden gem. Carved into the concrete jungle of skyscrapers was a fine establishment. It's called the Patriot House.
People don't know we're here, and their regulars do, and that's why, it's a little hidden gem. The bar's been here since 74? 76?
Really?
So, yeah, it's been here for it's been 40 odd years, but there's been people that come in here still that were back in the day.
Yeah.
Who were when they were in their 20s are still coming in now, yeah.
I had several beers and kept on exploring. For me, the lasting impression I will have of San Francisco is the parks. Each one was so unique and welcoming, like Sidney G. Walton Square. It seemed to tell a story of the neighborhood and the people that live there. I was back on the Embarcadero walking north. Rows upon rows of boats lined the docks along the waterfront. I was sucked into the tourist trap called Pier 39 just long enough to get some cool shots of Alcatraz off on the horizon. Unfortunately, making it out there wasn't in the cards for this trip, but I did see plenty of seagulls. Who knows, maybe one of these guys was the one who ate my cheeseburger. At Fisherman's Wharf, there were tons of shops for tourists. I wasn't a huge fan of this area, but I would recommend this seafood restaurant called Sabella and La Torre. I eventually made it all the way to the Great Meadow Park at Fort Mason. The next day, after much needed rest, I hopped on the BART train to the Mission District. It was a vibrant neighborhood that showed a more organic view of how people go about their daily lives. There are murals all over this place, and you get a sense that a strong Hispanic culture thrives in this part of town. It was here that I discovered my all-time favorite spot in San Francisco, Mission Dolores Park. The park is situated on a hill overlooking the downtown skyline. Everyone was out enjoying the nice weather. I was impressed by how these people were thriving in a COVID-19 world. Social distancing in their white circles and accepting the fact that this is a new normal until a vaccine is made. Spanish architecture was common in this area as well. Does anyone else appreciate the details of these facades? As beautiful as this place is, you can't help but be affected by the homelessness. It's tough to see people struggle like that, to be living in a tent on a busy street with no security. It's certainly a challenge that this city, and frankly, the entire country needs to address. Nothing will be perfect, but things can be improved. Even in the age of COVID-19, there's always hope for the future. San Francisco's mix of cultures, impressive architecture, idyllic backdrop, and kind people are equally worth pointing out. The views were magnificent, and I don't think I could dream up a more perfect location for a city. And to be fair, this was my first time visiting. I'm merely sharing my experience and perspective based on what I saw. I would love to hear your thoughts about San Francisco, as I'm sure they differ from mine in some ways. Thanks for watching.